Hello, everyone. This is Keith Stone, and I'm here again with Greg and Janet and Sarah and Elen for HeroesX office hours. This is for V12 of HeroesX, and we're discussing the questions for hours 7 and 8 and what the folks have been saying on the discussion boards. Hour 7, the question for that is, if no pictures had survived showing Achilles, would you think differently about this hero?
So there's one of the themes that's coming through quite strongly is that there are a number of people who feel that the words are so vivid and powerful that in a way they didn't want to see images. So they may give an analogy of like the movies kind of ruin the picture. And so, you know, they're thinking about, you know, how you can engage a lot of the senses in a way if you don't have that visual. So I guess would that chime in with your feelings, Greg, about the way the epic is quite visual in a lot of places?
Oh, it is so much so, and I recall the wonderful saying by Simonides, that wonderful poet who overlaps 6th and 5th centuries. He says, whereas pictures are silent poetry, poetry is talking pictures. And it's so true. And fantasia, which has become overused as the modern borrowing fantasy, if you look at what it used to mean, especially in Odyssey 8, I know we're not there yet. If you look at the verb from which fantasia or imagination comes from, it literally means projecting a light. And poetry projects a light, and that's like technologically anticipating what screening a picture is in cinema. Mm-hmm. And for that matter, Simonides is saying, reminds me of how when silent films became talkies, now that was talking pictures.
Right.
So in a sense, poetry anticipates the technological yearning for talking pictures. Mm-hmm. So I'm all there, and some of the pictures that we show our participants here and there show a bearded and short-haired Achilles. So not even all versions of Achilles in the visual arts feature him the way our Iliad does, which is beardless and long-haired. There's no doubt about that. There's a consistency for how to picture Achilles in the Iliad. And Keith and I were talking the other day about how when we read later on in our reading together Philostratus's treatise on heroes, you can even reconstruct a situation where all the Achaeans, how shall I say it, were long-haired until Achilles cut his hair. And then everybody cuts their hair except those Spartans. The Spartans are always going to be different. So they wear long hair even in the 5th century. I mean, Spartan men, Spartan warriors. So I love that response, is that in a sense, the visual arts can't keep up with the verbal arts.
I'm going to refer to Garrett Hines' talk at the center, and we can provide link for that. He talked about having a very limited space to visualize. Yes. And here we have a vase has a very specific limited space, and thinking about the sceneries, are these scenes the most popular scenes coming from maybe the relationship between text and depictions?
Yes, I think that's a beautiful link that you made, Janet. And you know, something that happened to me just today, I showed to a group of young people Gareth's an amazing picture of Helen. and how in the entire graphic novel by Gareth Hines, there's only one frame where you actually see the face of Helen of Troy. And what he was saying, I think in that same context that you mentioned, dear Janet, is that Helen's face is so unimaginably beautiful that you don't want to keep thrusting it at people, because then it might get to be habituating. And so Helen is veiled, her face is veiled, except for that one frame in the entire oeuvre of Gareth, which I thought was very clever. Mm-hmm. And similarly, on the male side, Achilles is supposed to be indescribably beautiful. Mm. So how do you handle indescribable? By doing it with verbal art.
Mm. Yeah, well, you mentioned a veil. What about the other vase paintings, you know, other than those shown in H24? You have some famous vases where Achilles is represented as being veiled. And one participant writes about that. And the participant is wondering, you know, that visualization of Achilles' lamenting and grieving is helping to understand better his character.
Yes. And how right you are that in paintings that show Achilles in sorrow, he tends to hide his face. That's so true, so true. It's probably a bit more complicated, or maybe even a lot more complicated, in the sense that there are other figures that are also shown grieving in the same way, where they cover their faces. But I admit, and I think our participant is onto something, that for Achilles to do it is special. Anything he does is special. Yeah.
Anything else in hour 7?
Well, there was just a little comment. A question too. If there had been no Iliad, would there have been no visual signs and no Achilles?
Well, yeah, if there had been no Iliad, I would say Achilles wouldn't be as central to the ancient Greek song culture as he has become. It's not quite a direct answer, but it skirts around what is a reality, which is that the Iliad is so Achilles-centric that without the Iliad, I just don't think there would be a central Achilles. The logic there isn't complete, but I really think that it's Homeric poetry that makes Achilles who he is. Homeric poetry as we know it. Wow, such a big topic. Why did I ever dare ask it? Shall we ask the next question?
Yes. Question for hour 8.
Yeah.
Have the pictures showing Patroklos complicated, or have they simplified your understanding of this hero?
You know what I think, but let's see how the participants circle around this.
Well, there's one train of thought is about thinking about the almost abstract ideas associated with the way Patroklos is depicted as the homunculus, the psyche, and also the Sema. And I think that has been not just Patroklos as a hero, but all of those things about him, and some of those more abstract concepts. Having the visual there, I think, has been helpful for people. Yes. And is this a sort of schematic way of depicting abstractions? Are there other abstractions that are maybe depicted in the vase paintings?
Yeah. I'm so glad, dear Sarah, that you started with the pictures that are featured so prominently in the book Ancient Greek Hero in 24 Hours. And that is especially where Patroklos looks like the body double of Achilles. And somehow his identity seems to be fused with the identity of Achilles, and that's even more blatant in visual arts than it is in verbal arts. So all that I accept. But what about situations where, and we do see this in paintings, where Achilles is represented as long-haired and beardless, but Patroklos is represented as short-haired and bearded. What do we see there? It's almost as if Patroklos is already the adult that Achilles never became. By adult, I mean somebody who is really eligible already to be married. And there's still that question about whether Achilles is ready to be married yet. That's certainly a question in the Iliad. And the fact that he cuts off his hair only as the Iliad draws to a close suggests it's almost too late for Achilles in our Iliad. So I think you could have it both ways. Patroklos can be just like Achilles, or it can be the Achilles that Achilles never became in the Iliad. And I'm thinking not only of how Patroklos is the kinder, gentler Achilles, as in the Lament of Briseis, don't you think, in 19, Iliad 19, but also in other situations where, for example, he is the healer, he is the physician that cult heroes become, and you don't see that in the Iliad. You don't see that image applied to Achilles himself. You see it in some vase paintings, but you don't see it in the Iliad. So I guess it's only to emphasize that the visual arts give you a bigger variety, not only of Achilles, that was the question for hour 7, but also for Patroklos, the question for hour 8. Since he is such a figure who's defined by Achilles, whether you want to contrast or whether you want to draw a parallel. So also a lot of the questions we have about all the varieties apply not just to Achilles but to Patroklos.
Achilles is so all-encompassing that even Hector gets drawn into it.
Totally.
Hector is who Achilles would have been if he had gone home.
Thank you, and that's certainly what we see in Sappho's Song 44, where in Sappho's vision, the marriage of Hector and Andromache can truly be understood for all its painful beauty if we understand that Achilles is just as much of a referent as is the then happy couple, Hector and Andromache. Yeah.
I'm going to quote the question. Obviously, we only have a selection of images here, but yes. I find myself wondering if this placement of the gaze of Achilles and the souffle centered on Hector's corpse as the chariot heads out to the tomb, but generally both gazing ahead after the chariot rounds the tomb, is a pictorial representation that has meaning to the Greeks. Does it signify something that has happened or changed?
Oh yes, that's a very acute observation by our observer, and the tomb of Achilles / Patroklos, that tomb is something that is the focus of attention for Achilles in some picturings, and then in other picturings you really see him swiveling his head and pointing his attention 180 degrees in the other direction. Towards the parents of Hector, whom he should be hating more than anybody else because they're the parents of Hector, the one person who is his deadliest enemy. And yet in the Boston Hydria, that's what we see. We see a real swiveling, a real shift of attention. And the shift of attention shows us that we too can have 180 degrees turn in what we're focusing on. Are we focusing on the anger of Achilles at Hector? Are we focusing on his potential compassion towards Hector's parents?
Mhm.
It's a lovely observation.
Well, I know, Greg, you have to go.
I have to go,
So we should
but
wrap up.
this was such a delightful exchange with our participants who, am I right in thinking that people are just getting sharper and sharper with every hour? And it's so gratifying to see. So thank you all. I'm going to wave goodbye.
All right. See you all next time.
Bye.